I mean, you mentioned the Padova journey. It was less than a handful of appearances for them, I think, before he moved to
Yep.
Samp. But on his debut, he was apparently the youngest player in Italy that whole season,
Right, right.
professional levels at 16 when he made that debut, and then went to Sampdoria. But I think he didn't spend too long there either, did he? He went initially on loan, and then
Yep.
they signed him. But then I think it was a matter of months later he was sold again. Was that
Yeah.
more financially motivated?
I think so. I think so. And then, Samp have had a lot of troubles. They narrowly avoided relegation from Serie B. I mean, in a typical Italian piece of jiggery pokery, they were relegated, then they weren't relegated, then they were playing in a playoff. And so they did survive. So it was a kind of troubled team, I think. And although Parma were struggling in Serie A, definitely a more settled club at the moment, and he proved to be exactly what they needed in terms of kind of putting a solid defence that would help them. Parma came up as a sort of fairly swashbuckling counter-attacking side, but they were just conceding too many goals. The approach that saw them did them well in Serie B was kind of found wanting a bit in Serie A, but he really helped to shore up the defence and kept that team afloat. So and they also, I think, saw it as a pretty smart piece of business, and I think that it is going to prove to be that way.
Yeah, and do you think was he almost kind of well thought of throughout his youth career? Do you know, or is it more a case of he's just recently exploded as a player?
And I think he was always rated because he played for the under-17s as well as the 19s. So I think he was always well thought of. He's a big, tall lad though, and that often I think takes time to kind of fill out your frame, if you will. I think he's 6'5", I think. And that takes a bit of time, but he's been fairly regular in the under-19 setup, and now, there's chat that he could be called up for Italy's next round of games, full international games under Gattuso. He's casting the net quite widely, and they think he could be the man to keep Haaland under control against Norway. So, no, an easy introduction to the international scene. I think but it speaks, a lot of what he's thought of. So it has been, it's definitely the last 6 months have been crazy for him, but he was definitely a name that was kicking around to those that watched Italian football, to those that know Italian football, certainly as a potential under 21 player at the time. Even though he was only 16 or 17. But now he's really sort of burned through that, and as I say, he's certainly being mentioned as with the national team kind of struggling so badly in their group. There's a lot of calls for a new generation to come through, and he'd be one of the standard bearers for the new generation, definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully he'll keep Haaland quiet on multiple fronts
Yeah,
if he
yeah.
joins the Reds as well. But I'm going to read you some names, Giancarlo. Daniele Padelli, Andrea De Sena, Alberto Aquilani, Fabio Barini, Mario Bertelli, and of course Federico Chiesa. We won't count Thiago Alcantara, even though he was born in Italy. But that's quite a list of players who have all red. So please tell us he's going to have a greater impact than those listed.
Well, I'd never like to overpromise with these things, but from that list, there's a lot of underachievers there. I mean, it's a curious mix of players as well, really. I mean, there's players there that came. I mean, I would say Chiesa the biggest reputation of any of those players, but Aquilani was a good player, and Borini was on his way up, I think, when he signed for Liverpool. It never quite scaled the heights. I mean, I guess it takes always with these things. It takes two to tango, doesn't it? It takes the player. All I can say is that from what I know of him, wherever he's gone, he's done well. He's adapted to his surroundings. He's taking the challenge. He seems a boy with his head screwed on. He's just finished his school exams, which shows how young he is. He just did his maturita at school. In fact, he's dyslexic, so he said that studying is harder than playing football was what he said. So but he intends to carry on his studies in some way. How that works out, I don't know. With in Italy, they're quite understanding about these things. I don't know how easy that'll be for him to actually do if he does come to England. But don't hunt me down if in 2 years' time you're selling him a loss. But he does look a prospect. But he's a prospect. That's the thing, is I think you're buying on the future player. I'd be surprised that he would sort of slot straight in. If you look at we spoke of Calafiori last year, and you look at the impact. I mean, yes, affected by injury, but Calafiori was already a full Italian international, and he had his difficulties in finding a place. I mean, I would argue he deserves a place in the Arsenal starting 11, but clearly people that know more about football than I do at Arsenal don't think the same. And it did murder my fantasy football team for a number of weeks, that approach, to see him sitting on the bench. But I think I wouldn't be putting Leoni into your fantasy team just yet. But great backup to have, great attitude, and I mean, who knows? As I say, I mean, he certainly, as a prospect, he's got a lot to recommend him over those names you mentioned there. Although Balotelli at the time was still a pretty hot property in football, and they had already all those players had already done more in the game than Leoni has now. But the sky's the limit in terms of, as I say, not to be Allegro Italian, CEO Captain Italy, or our intro where he was, Maldini and Baresi and Scirea all in one. But he does look a good player, and it really needs, the club needs to nurture him as a player, and I think they do seem to be a good club, Liverpool, in terms of bringing through young players and not rushing them, but equally, if they're good enough, they're old enough, sort of thing. So it's a great opportunity for them, and I hope, in 5 years' time or whatever, we'll be doing this and saying, well, look at that. Eventually they got the right Italian. So
hopefully the seventh time lucky.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
I hope you're enjoying this free show at the moment. Loads of excellent, exciting stuff on the Anfield app. If you want to be part of the whole thing, you can download the Anfield app and go from there. Or you can subscribe via the YouTube membership as well for video-only content and other bits and pieces. We love doing these shows. We love that you watch them. So come, be part of the journey with us.